So you know that saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Well, the scientists say the gut is not like Vegas, i.e. what happens in the gut does not stay in the gut. If your digestive system is breached, it will affect the rest of the body. And today I'm going to explain to you exactly why and how all of those seemingly unrelated chronic health problems and symptoms that you've had for many, many years are actually all connected to poor gut health. Now, I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but everything is connected. Like, everyone knows that the brain is like the CEO of the body, right? But it's not the only thing in charge. The gut has a lot to say about what goes on in the body as well. So I like to think of the gut as like the COO. It ensures that the company or your body is operating smoothly and your daily functions and procedures are happening essentially. It's processing food, it's absorbing nutrients, it is eliminating waste, it's creating neurotransmitters and hormones and coordinating the immune system. Like, let's not sleep on how important the gut is for us and our health. And most importantly, the CEO and the COO work together to ensure that things are running smoothly. So when the gut is out of whack, everything else follows suit. Just like when you have problems neurologically, every organ system is going to be affected as well. And look, it's only been about 10 years since we discovered just how important the gut is. Like, it was only a recent discovery that the gut has its own nervous system, the enteric nervous system, and it literally communicates with every single system in the body. So let's talk about what a healthy gut should do. The intestinal lining is essentially the lining that separates the digestive system, which is processing all of these things that we consume from the external environment, and it separates it from the bloodstream, okay? So I like to think of it as like the gatekeeper. You shall not pass, and it lets all the good stuff in while keeping the bad stuff out. The intestinal lining is made up of a bunch of little cells that are closely packed together by something called tight junctions. And these are like the checkpoints of like the border between two countries that essentially opens and closes to let the citizens in and keep the foreign immigrants out. So when your intestinal lining is healthy, it knows who's a foreigner and who's not. So things like nutrients, amino acids, glucose, electrolytes, and other vitamins and minerals are allowed to enter the bloodstream. And then other things like undigested food particles, toxins, and bacteria are all kept out. Now to meet the villain of the story, zonulin. It actually sounds pretty like evil, but look, zonulin ain't all that bad. So it is a little protein that is the gatekeeper and essentially allows these tight junctions to open and close so that we can let things in and out. Now the issue is when there's too much zonulin, we start to get what's called leaky gut. Okay, this is when our intestinal lining becomes too permeable or leaky, i.e. those border checkpoints are open and it's a free-for-all for anyone to enter the country. When all the invaders sneak in, your body detects that there are foreign invaders and releases the military to go and deal with it, and it ain't pretty. Your body goes into battle mode and it triggers a huge immune and inflammatory response, and then that can lead to a myriad of long-term health problems, a whole bunch that we're going to get into today. But it all starts because the intestinal lining is not doing its job properly by keeping things out and protecting your internal organs and systems. So let's talk about how leaky gut develops, what it eventually leads to, and of course, how to fix it. Stage 1, hyperpermeability. Hyperpermeability, which in layman's terms is those tight junctions ain't so tight anymore. And the reason why this develops is because we are doing something or exposed to something that is increasing the permeability of the gut lining. So let's go through a few of the biggest ones. Biggest one, first things first, pro-inflammatory foods. Things like gluten, refined sugars, alcohols, seed oils. sometimes dairy. These are things that our bodies have just not been adapted to consume and deal with. And so there is an inflammatory response that happens in the gut every time we consume these foods. For example, the data are very clear that everybody has an inflammatory reaction to gluten, not just celiacs. And whilst we all have varying responses to gluten, we can show that there is intestinal inflammation when we consume gluten. And that's not to say that inflammation is inherently bad. I mean, anything can cause inflammation. When you weight train, you're literally causing inflammation. So I don't want to villainize gluten, which I know can be very popular in the holistic health community, because let's be honest, not everybody responds terribly to gluten. But if you're somebody who overconsumes it or has other issues that is causing inflammation, then consuming gluten can just add fuel to that fire. So I think context really matters, but the facts speak for themselves. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat that gluten is totally fine, because from a health perspective, it's not. And the issue is when you have inflammation at the gut lining, especially too much of it, if you're consuming gluten and dairy and alcohol on a regular basis, then it can damage the integrity of that lining, and then the lining becomes more leaky. The next biggest cause of leaky gut, chronic stress. And this goes hand in hand with a poor diet, okay? So one of the functions of cortisol is to actually make the gut more permeable, which means that if you have chronically elevated cortisol levels, you most likely have leaky gut. Which leads me to the perfect example of people who go to Italy on vacation for a month and they're eating bowls of pasta every day, and they're not necessarily working out or moving as much as they usually would back home, and yet somehow they're tolerating the gluten so well and they feel incredible, they're light on their feet, they don't feel bloated. And then the moment they get home, go back to work, it's like all of a sudden the tiniest morsel of gluten makes them puff up like Harry Potter's insufferable auntie. It's because when you're less stressed, your intestinal lining is probably a lot more rigid and resilient, which means that you can probably handle having a little bit more gluten than usual. Next up, environmental toxins. I think they deserve a big mention here. Anything from exposure to mold, like if you've got mold in your household, heavy metal poisoning, whether that be from having too much fish, or dental fillings, or air pollution, consuming genetically modified pesticide sprayed vegetables that you get from the supermarket. These can all add up. And again, it might not necessarily be one singular cause, but it could be the Avengers of inflammation all lining up. And maybe one on its own might not affect you that much. But when you get the Avengers together, all hell will break loose. And just on the topic of, non-organic foods, most of them are sprayed with antibiotics, pesticides, and glyphosate, which, if you don't know, is a weed killer, which apparently is non-toxic to humans. But I just want to know which scientists were paid off to say that, because there's new research, even as recent as 2018, to show that it does directly cause intestinal permeability. And it does also change the gut microbiome, which is essentially changing the species of bacteria that live in your gut. The rest of our food supply, like animals, are constantly being fed antibiotics and very rarely are pasture fed. So I'm not trying to foster a sense of impending doom and fear that nothing can be trusted, although it is kind of true. Like, no, you can't trust the Western food supply. It is unavoidable for the most part. I get that. And we are going to be exposed to environmental toxins, whether we like it or not. I think it's just important to get rid of the big heavy hitters, just so that we are not continually adding more and more fuel to a fire that's already present. So if you can eat organic, fantastic. If not, okay, well, how about you clean out your bathroom of all of that mold? Or how about you start buying some grass-fed, hormone-free meat instead? I think you have to look at the overall lifestyle rather than just saying, oh, well, everything is toxic for me, so I may as well not try anyway. And another important and interesting driver behind leaky gut is even just hormone imbalances. Like women with low estrogen are more susceptible to having leaky gut because estrogen has anti-inflammatory properties, and it's also very, very protective of the intestinal lining. Medications are another example, and I'm talking as simple as aspirin and ibuprofen. If you're somebody who takes them every day, or when you get the mildest of headaches, I would just say build up your pain tolerance and only take them when you really need them, because they do cause cumulative damage to the intestinal lining. And especially if your diet ain't it and you're chronically stressed, you're probably more susceptible to more damage. Now, antibiotics are a very interesting one because not only can they contribute to leaky gut, but they can also cause gut dysbiosis. In fact, I wouldn't even say it's a can, they almost always do cause gut dysbiosis. So gut dysbiosis is when your microbiome is out of balance. Your microbiome is like an ecosystem that lives within your gut as well as your mouth and your skin, and it's made up of many different species like bacteria, archaea, fungi, even some yeast, and just other microorganisms. And they all live in this symbiotic relationship with us. They do things for us, like help us ferment foods and digest and extract certain nutrients. They help us make fatty acids and certain vitamins that we can't make ourselves. They help to coordinate and activate the immune system. So yeah, we actually really need this bacteria and all these other microorganisms. And it goes without saying that your microbiome also helps to protect the integrity of your intestinal lining. So what happens when you take antibiotics? Well, you take it to kill the bad bacteria that has caused infection, but unfortunately, you're also going to kill a lot of the species in your microbiome. And that's what we would call good bacteria. And essentially, this is what can cause dysbiosis. It's an imbalance in the good versus bad bacteria. And it's not just antibiotics that can cause this problem. Eating too much sugar, fiber, wheat, that can also feed the bad bacteria and kill off the good bacteria. So back to like the ecosystem analogy, imagine that you have all these different species living together, and then I suddenly cut off the food supply of these really important plants that produce oxygen for the ecosystem that they live in. All of a sudden, you don't have enough oxygen because you've killed off that species, and you see that this ecosystem starts to die slowly. I know that was an extreme example, but it's kind of what happens in the gut when you don't feed all the species that are necessary for optimal health. And this is when it gets problematic because you have two issues here. You've got dysbiosis, which is an overgrowth of bad bacteria, and then you've also got leaky gut. So what happens is the bad bacteria start to release too much LPS, or lipopolysaccharides. So lipopolysaccharides are just found on the outer membrane of gram-negative bacteria, which you don't need to know too much about. But basically, when there's too much LPS, that seeps out into the bloodstream because it can pass the tight junctions, and then it causes something called endotoxemia. LPS should not escape the gut. If it's localized in the gut, we're fine. Once it seeps out into the bloodstream, it causes a massive inflammatory and immune response, and that is essentially endotoxemia. And then that then leads to chronic disease. So if we think about what inflammation is at its root, it is a natural response to damage in the body. So back to my example of training, like weightlifting, it causes inflammation because your muscle fibers have been damaged and the inflammation helps to rebuild it. So when your body detects that there's a threat or that there is damage, it will essentially trigger cytokines. Cytokines then kick off this massive cascade of events that lead to inflammation, and all of these immune cells are coordinating together to try to get rid of this predator or this threat. And if this goes on for long enough, it will lead to tissue damage and organ damage because it's a pretty hectic process. And if it goes on for longer than it should, then you will start to experience some long-term side effects. Things like digestive problems, everything from constipation, SIBO, acid reflux. You will see leaky brain and neurological symptoms, mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, mood irregularities fit within this category as well. And even things like autism. I think last time I checked, it was 90% of children with autism have gut problems as well. Like, there is a very intimate relationship here. The gut-brain axis is crucial information that everybody should know, but I digress. We also see metabolic disease that's linked with gut dysbiosis and leaky gut. So things like insulin resistance, which then can lead to type 2 diabetes and obesity, fatty liver disease. We see skin issues, psoriasis, eczema, chronic cystic acne, rosacea. All of these fall within this category. Joint pain is a symptom of inflammation. Allergies, asthma, food insensitivities. And that's essentially something that's benign that your immune system is overreacting to and sees as malignant and harmful. Autoimmunity. This is a big one. My theory is that most people who have autoimmune conditions started with leaky gut and or dysbiosis. I could be wrong though, but I'm probably not. So Hashimoto's and Graves' disease, where your body is not recognizing self cells like the thyroid gland and then launches a massive attack on it. So to the point where it's literally degrading your own body tissues. I can't imagine anything worse than your body turning on itself and having chronic inflammation because you can't produce enough of something that you need. Or a condition like multiple sclerosis, MS, where your body is attacking the myelin sheaths of the nerves. Or, rheumatoid arthritis, your body is attacking the synovial fluid between your joints. This autoimmunity was triggered by chronic inflammation and dysregulation of your immune system. And while we still don't know 100% what drives autoimmunity, the research is starting to evolve, and we're starting to see a relationship between autoimmunity and poor gut health. I think there was a 2021 study. The study suggested that your immune system can start to recognize healthy self cells as foreign after it has initially responded to a threat that, surprise, surprise, came from leaky gut. And so it is essentially dysregulated. It doesn't know what is foreign and what is self. And that's pretty sad. So how do we fix leaky gut? We want to restore the integrity of the intestinal lining. We want to give our body tissue time to heal from this chronic inflammation. And before that, we need to stop the inflammation. We need to calm the immune system. And the way you can do it is simply by avoiding the things that caused it in the first place. You don't need to take medications for IBS. You don't need to jump on the pill. You don't need to take steroids in order to mask the symptoms. You need to address the cause. So I would focus on 4 main areas: nutrition, movement, stress, and environmental toxins. Starting with nutrition, as I've alluded to already, aiming for anti-inflammatory foods and ideally organic foods would be your best bet. Avoiding gluten, refined sugars, alcohol, seed oils, and just other pro-inflammatory foods would be the best thing for you. And I would say a good 2 to 3 months is the minimum to start seeing the effects in your health. And also, I wouldn't say that it's just for the short term, because as soon as you start reintroducing these foods again, you probably will have adverse health responses to it. So I get it. I know it's hard, especially if you're somebody who's used to having bread every day. But my question to you is, how bad are your symptoms? How far are you willing to go to get rid of them? And if the answer is anything, I'd do anything, then prove it. And I think just like anything, it's hard at the start, but you really need to build habits layer by layer until eventually it becomes something you do on autopilot. I would say be strict for the first 6 to 12 weeks And then you can start to be a little bit more lenient, because I totally agree with the other argument, which is that if you have a restrictive diet, it can foster a poor relationship with food, binging, and in and of itself is a health concern. So I don't want to say that the food elimination diet is something to do forever, but I think at least for 6 weeks, just to start to see your inflammation come down would be best. Just like when you are dirt poor, you can't afford to be going out and having fancy dinners. You are saving every dollar you can. When you've got a bit saved up, then you can probably afford to have that nice dinner here or there, or to buy yourself something nice. But I think that in an extreme situation, an extreme response is needed. And as your gut changes, your brain changes. When you feed the good bacteria more than the bad bacteria, sorry to use such exclusive binary terms, but when you change the makeup of your microbiome, that has a direct effect on what you crave and then what you gravitate towards. So once you've been strict for a good while and you start to see your health improve, the best way to reintroduce these pro-inflammatory food groups without having very negative consequences is focus more on frequency and less on quantity. Let me use an analogy to explain this. Let's say that you have a fire brigade and there are small fires popping up every day. And so your fire brigade is going out and putting out these small fires every single day. And then let's say a week later, a massive fire pops up. All of your men are tired. You don't have any, fire trucks. Like, your resources are down, and you probably won't be able to put out that massive fire. Now, if we compare that to a fire brigade that is only called once a week, they have the resources, they have the manpower, they have the strength and resilience to put that big fire out because they haven't been called all week. And that's why I think frequency matters more, because if you're eating a little bit of gluten every day, that's like a little bit of inflammation every day that your body has to fight. And then let's say you have a day where not only do you eat a lot of gluten, but you also have a big drinks and you have a birthday cake as well. Like, that's a pretty damn big fire to put out. Compared to spending 6 days a week eating anti-inflammatory foods, being in a healed and regenerative and neutral state, then once a week, you might even have heaps of gluten, heaps of sugar. Your body could probably handle that because it's had the time to heal. And personally, that's what works best for me. I think that you shouldn't take what I say as Bible. I think doing your own research is helpful, but also doing your own trial and error, because everybody is truly different, matters. But I think that if you can get down to once a week, twice a week, it would be so much better. Plus, the more you eat something, the more you crave it, because it does impact the bacteria that you're feeding. So the less you eat gluten, the less you crave it and the easier it gets. Another thing about nutrition, I am a huge proponent for going longer between meals. Not to say that you have to intermittent fast. I don't do that. I don't think it's necessary for a lot of people unless you have something like SIBO. But the reason why going longer between meals is helpful is because you let your internal garbage collecting system sweep up all of the bad stuff and help clean your gut more regularly. So we have something called the migratory motor complex, MMC, and it's pretty much this pulse-like system of contractions that's triggered by the nervous system, the enteric nervous system. And it basically causes cycles of movement or contractions through the gut, and it sweeps the gut of everything that's in there, whether there's food, toxins, bacteria, all of that stuff. And these cycles happen every 90 minutes. So if you're eating every 90 minutes to 2 hours, then there's always food that needs to be dealt with, rather than allowing the MMC to sweep the gut and actually clean it from all the other gunk. So we want to do things to support the migratory motor complex so that we can fast track the healing in the gut. And there's 2 ways that you can do this. Number 1, go about 4 hours between meals. And if you want to intermittent fast, you can, but you don't have to. And number 2, make sure that you're getting movement in. When you move your body, you activate the muscles of your digestive system, and you also stimulate the migratory motor complex, which then in turn aids digestion and it improves your digestive health. That is why being sedentary is associated with digestive problems like constipation and bloating. Part of the reason is because you're not activating the MMC. And I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that exercise will help reduce inflammation and improve overall health. So yeah, don't skip out on movement. Reduce your stress. The thing is, chronic stress contributes to a trifecta of health problems. Number one, it causes dysbiosis because it leads to the overgrowth of harmful bacteria. Secondly, it impairs the intestinal lining and makes it more permeable, aka causes leaky gut. And thirdly, stress can activate the immune system and promote inflammation. So, chronic stress needs to go. If it means you got to quit that job, it's time. If you got to leave that relationship, if you've got to downsize your lifestyle so you're not stressed about money all the time or keeping up appearances, address that trauma. Go to therapy, speak or journal about your problems, build resilience, change the way you view stress. That's a big one as well. Eat better, work out, that will help improve your mental health, which in turn makes you feel better. And also, when you have a lot of built up cortisol, working out is the best way to release that. Eat first thing in the morning before you have caffeine. And on that point, stop drinking too much coffee throughout the day. I think we all know what is contributing to chronic stress. It's just a matter of facing yourself and being a little bit more accountable and just stop doing the things that you know are hurting you. Alongside stress management is sleep. Most of the healing happens when we sleep. And so 8 hours is the minimum. I would even argue aiming for 9 to 10, especially at a time when you are trying to heal. And melatonin and cortisol have an inverse relationship. So the more you sleep and the better your sleep cycles are, the better your cortisol cycles will be as well. And so there won't be such chronically elevated cortisol levels throughout the day. And to speak from my own experience here, when I am emotionally stressed, I tend to break out the most. Even when my nutrition is on point, my external stresses are low, as soon as there is some unresolved conflict or I'm not living in alignment or something is emotionally stressing me, I will start to break out. And so that's something that I've really had to work on, is not just addressing the conflict and living in alignment, but also improving my tolerance for emotional stress and learning how to control my reactions through mindfulness and meditating and just trying to be a more resilient person. If you're doing all the right things with your nutrition and you're working out, but your stress is not changing, then I don't know what to tell you. It's almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot, you know? And then lastly, environmental toxins. Clean up your water supply, stop drinking tap water. Try and reduce as best you can all of the genetically modified glyphosate sprayed food that you're consuming. Aim for grass-fed meats when you can. Try to eat A-grade seafood if you can. I know that shit can be expensive, but you know, I think again, it's just about managing the toxic load. So if you can't afford to have A-grade seafood and grass-fed meat, well, could you have less canned tuna, you know? Stop taking antibiotics, please. Swap out your BPA and plastics for glass. You can buy water filter jugs for like $100 to $200 online. It doesn't have to be that expensive. And if you're living with mold or really bad air pollution, that needs to go. Now, I know you might wonder why there are some people out there, and I'm sure you know one of them, that eats exorbitant amounts of sugar and dairy and gluten, and they binge drink every weekend. They never get enough sleep, and yet they are super skinny. Their skin is glowing. They seem like they have heaps of energy. They don't have any joint pain or anything like that. And then you compare that to yourself, or at least in my case, I can compare that to myself, where I am extremely sensitive to, you know, what foods I eat, sleep deprivation, stress, and the tiniest thing can trigger so much. And I think this is where a few other factors come into play. Things like your genetics, epigenetics as well, your birth and your infantile years really matter. Some people are just built different. They have better microbiomes, they have stronger immune systems, more resilient digestive systems, and it really depends on, were they born via C-section or vaginally? Were they exposed to stress from a young age or not? Do they have parents who are more different? Interracial couples and, couples that are more dissimilar have more dissimilar immune systems, and that in turn makes their baby more resilient because they are protected from a wider range of diseases. So for me, I was born via C-section, and as an infant, I got sick a lot. And so the first 5 years of my life, I was on antibiotics. I have a theory that no doubt had a role to play in why I am acne prone and stress prone. And speaking of stress, I know that my mother was chronically stressed during her pregnancy with me compared to my other siblings. And what happens is when a mother is releasing a lot more cortisol during pregnancy, it crosses the placenta, and then that in turn causes the baby to produce more glucocorticoid receptors, okay? Which pretty much makes the baby more susceptible to stress. A vaginal birth is so important for a healthy microbiome later on in life, because when the baby is delivered, they are coated in the mother's vaginal bacteria, and that includes a diverse array of bacteria that you can't get anywhere else. And it's time critical as well. This early colonization of your microbiome is crucial for your immune system and for proper digestion and absorption of nutrients as well. And we know that kids that are born via C-section are more susceptible to getting things like weaker immune systems, allergies, asthma, even obesity. And as for taking antibiotics as a kid, you are pretty much wiping out bacteria species that may never come back again. So yeah, I think all of those factors are really important to consider in terms of how resilient someone's gut is and how well they can tolerate foods and stresses and environmental toxins. But in saying so, I think it's also really important to recognize that just because somebody may present as asymptomatic in your eyes doesn't mean that they are asymptomatic or that there isn't something going on. Just because somebody doesn't bloat or cramp or get acne doesn't mean that they're not experiencing brain fog or anxiety and depression or acid reflux or heartburn. Don't judge a book by its cover. And also, they may be able to get away with a poor lifestyle now because they're young and they're taking advantage of good genetics and circumstances, but eventually it's gonna catch up with them. And I hope it doesn't, but if you abuse your health, it will eventually come back to bite you in the butt. That's just a harsh truth that everybody has to accept. But I think that focusing on yourself is the best thing you can do. Comparison is the thief of joy. I personally wouldn't dwell too much on why somebody else can get away with things that you can't. That's just life. So do you, boo. Focus on you, trial and error, and figure out what works best for your lifestyle. And remember that what makes you feel and perform optimally is going to be completely different to somebody else. So if you are all about holistic health and wellness, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. And on the topic of empowerment and healing, stick around because next up is my story. I suffered with chronic health conditions for over a year. Everything from leaky gut to severe neurological problems, chronic fatigue, cystic acne, the list goes on and on. So I'm gonna let that queue up next. But if anything, I wanna give you insight into how it's possible to heal. And I hope that you get the inspiration that you need and the motivation to take matters into your own hands and decide enough is enough. Today is the day that I heal. If you need support and guidance and you'd like to work with a coach who not only understands what you're going through, but can help you overcome your health problems so that you can get on with life and actually start living, then the link is in the description box down below to work with me. Anyway, I will leave it there. See y'all in the next video. Ciao.